Thank you so much to everyone who is joining this conversation today about how we need to come together to stop gun violence in America. Ahead of tonight's convention program, which will feature survivors and advocates for gun safety, we are honored to have your thoughtful partnership in a conversation about how we can move our country forward. Because ending gun violence requires all of us to work together, from advocates to legislators, survivors to educators, and more. We have several amazing panelists joining us today, including Congresswoman Lucy McBath, Randy Weingarten, Reggie Moore, Alejandro Bedoya, and Simone Sanders. And I am so looking forward to turning to them in a few moments. First, I want to set the table about the moment that we're in. And I know I don't have to tell you all that we're living with an epidemic of gun violence in our country. We see the headlines every single day. And so you also know that COVID isn't the only public health crisis that is lacking leadership from the White House. We have endured 4 painful years of a president who has bragged about being able to shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue with impunity, who took unprecedented sums of campaign cash from the gun lobby, and who has refused to stand up to the NRA time and time again. Donald Trump and his enablers in the Senate have failed to protect families across America over and over, after Parkland, after Las Vegas, after El Paso, and countless other acts of gun violence in between and since. Donald Trump has played down deadly attacks by white supremacists, diminished acts of deadly police brutality, and he thought nothing of firing rubber bullets at journalists and peaceful protesters to clear a path for a photo op. And as COVID has spiraled out of control, the spread of daily gun violence has been exacerbated by COVID in devastating ways. In recent months, we've seen gun sales go through the roof. We've seen domestic gun violence soar as more victims, mostly women and children, are trapped at home or unable to access safer spaces and support. We've seen city gun violence skyrocket, and we've seen an increase in gun-involved suicides, as well as data that shows a growing number of people are struggling with thoughts of suicide as a result of the pandemic. And who is profiting from all of this violence? Gun manufacturers, retailers, and the lobbyists that support them, along with a cowardly politician whose campaigns are brimming with their cash. As with combating COVID, addressing America's gun violence epidemic will require comprehensive solutions and effective advocacy at the federal, state, and local level. It also requires all of us to get in the ring and fight to elect candidates who care more about protecting our families than protecting the NRA. That's why our 6 million survivors, volunteers, and supporters of Moms Demand Action and Students Demand Action have never been more fired up to make change this November at every level, in every zip code. We're gearing up to send 2 of our strongest allies, Vice President Joe Biden and Senator Kamala Harris, to the White House, where they will continue to stand up to the NRA, to put our families first, and to restore decency and integrity to the Oval Office. I know we can turn the tide in this election because we've done it before. The gun safety movement redrew the map in 2018 by electing gun sense candidates across the country in the halls of Congress, in state houses, and in governors' mansions. And last year in Virginia's 2019 elections, gun safety was the #1 issue for voters, who elected a gun sense majority to lead the state's legislature for the first time in 2 decades. Our hope for today's conversation is to inspire you to join us in this fight. And I can't think of a better person to open the conversation with today than Randy Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers. Teachers are being asked to do so much right now. And one of the most important things that we can do for them is to ensure that they and their students are safe at school. So Randy, thank you so much to you and your members for all that you do.
Thank you, Shannon. And I just want to say, I want to honor the people on this panel. Congresswoman McBath, Reggie, Simone, Alejandro. They are warriors in this fight. And sometimes this fight feels, I was on a call with Congresswoman Escobar yesterday, 2 days ago, about reopening schools. And we were thinking back about a year ago being in El Paso because of the murderous rampage that happened in the Walmart. But there is a connection here. So I just want to say thank you to all of you, you particularly Shannon and Congresswoman Macbeth, for everything that you've done and will do. But there is a connection here in terms of what we need to do and why it's so important to elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. We are trying to have a safe and welcoming environment everywhere, particularly in schools. And it was interesting to me how quickly the Trump administration was very willing to go and try to make schools into school fortresses, using the term that they should be safe, because they wanted to actually have the gun manufacturers and the other manufacturers do all that hardware. And frankly, they changed about 96% of schools to have that kind of hardware and making schools more into fortresses instead of actually dealing with the issues like registration and getting assault weapons off the streets and getting all the other things that all of us have been advocating for years. And what we've also seen is a lot of the assault training or the training in schools has created real trauma. But what's happened is you quickly look to this and this month and how they have been silent about or pretty much mishandled everything about school reopening. Because it's not kids that are issues for them. Kids are dispensable. Teachers are dispensable. Many of the communities we represent are dispensable to them. What it was always about was the connection to the NRA. Because if they actually cared about safety and health, they'd be caring about it right now, and they don't care about it at all. And so ultimately, what we need to do, I think, particularly since we are seeing in this moment of time the number of guns on streets in terms of Chicago and other places. We're seeing that the vigilance that all of us had beforehand, because we're now facing 3 other crises, this is not top of mind right now, is that we need to actually make this argument about how are we going to make sure that we keep everybody safe in a real way, in a welcoming way. And that means the kind of common sense work that all of us have done to get more and more and more guns off the street. And how are we going to make sure that we deal with the trauma and the anxiety that so many people face in the aftermath of either gun violence or now in the aftermath of COVID, the aftermath of an economic recession, or the aftermath of what should be a real reckoning with racial justice. That's what we're trying to do in schools. So the last thing I'll just say is we need the policies that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the Democratic platform has put together, that the Joe and Bernie joint committees have put together to have like community schools wrapping services around schools so that we can actually really address the agita, we can address the trauma, we can do this in a systemic way, we can meet children where they are, we can actually see if there's an SOS, not with a fortress and not with more guns, but with actually really thinking about how we get underneath the trauma that people have or the issues that somebody might have that would bring a gun into a school or a gun into a Walmart. So those are the kind of things that we're trying to do right now, really get underneath the trauma and really focus on safe and welcoming in a way that's much more holistic, that's much more about what Maslow would talk about as opposed to what the NRA would talk about. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Randy. We really appreciate all the work that you are doing. And we all have to get off the sidelines, not just in this election, but each and every day that another mom loses a child to gun violence, is another day that hopefully this conversation will inspire everyone to join the fight. And if anyone can do that, it is my friend, Congresswoman Lucy Macbeth, who has said I can call her Lucy on this discussion, so that's good. When Lucy's son Jordan was shot and killed, she became determined to make change. And she joined Moms Demand Action to advocate for common sense gun safety laws. Now, I'm so proud to say that she is a member of Congress. And Lucy, we're so excited to have your back going into November and to have you here joining us today. So can you say a few words to everyone?
Thank you so much, Shannon. And I just have to say, I am so excited to be with such a powerhouse group of individuals that are really fighting for our communities. And thank you for everyone that is joining us today. I am Lucy McBath. I am the Congresswoman from Georgia's 6th Congressional District. I want to thank every single person that is joining us today. And of course, thank you to Everytown for Gun Safety and Shannon Watts for hosting this event and all the phenomenal work you've been doing for years. Everytown holds a very special place in my heart for allowing me to find my voice in this movement and to help organize after the death of my son. And Shannon, you were one of my strongest allies in this fight for common sense gun safety reforms. And thank you so much for all that you continue to do. And thank you for giving me the voice. As many of you know, I lost my son Jordan in a racially motivated shooting to a man who was unable to really see the value in my son, to see the value of a young Black male. And so regardless of all the titles that I will ever be given, the title that I have now, the most important title for me will always be the mother of Jordan Davis, because that is truly intrinsically who I really am in every fiber of my being. And when I had him, he was such a caring boy, and he would always go through really great lengths to make sure that everyone around him was cared for and protected, and that no one was ever left out. And while I was raising Jordan, I was working as a flight attendant for Delta Airlines. I flew for them for about 30 years, and I would always make sure that every schedule that I had, my schedule always made sure that I was at home every single evening to make sure that I was sowing that seed into my boy to make sure that he would be a person and a human being that cared about others outside of him. But I was raising him and making sure that he had the best of what a mother should be giving her child. Then almost 8 years ago, and as most of you know, my life completely changed forever, just in the blink of an eye. Jordan and his friends were simply going shopping. It was on Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. This is in November 2012. And they simply stopped to get chewing gum at a convenience store gas station, because as I always say, you know, Jordan kept saying, if we're going to pick up girls at the mall, guys, we got to have fresh breath. In that 3.5 minutes, Jordan was sitting in the back seat of the car with his friends, and a man named Michael Dunn pulled up next to them on the passenger side, and told them to turn down their thug music. Yes, they were playing rap music, and he told them to turn down their thug music, that he couldn't hear himself think. He called them gangbangers, and he called them thugs, and he proceeded to fire 10 shots into the car. And most of them, of course, were aimed at my son Jordan. He died instantly. Now, that deep and racially motivated hate that day from a man who was empowered by his gun completely changed my life in an instant. I went from being just this regular mom suburban mom in an Atlanta suburb to being a mother on a mission. And I am truly on a mission. I began demanding more from our leaders, from the very people that I work with now in Washington that are my colleagues. Why were they silent about over 100 people in this country continue to die every single day senselessly from unnecessary gun violence? Why were they silent? Why was our clergy silent? And yes, why were our state and local leaders silent in our very own communities? And why were they doing nothing about this? And let's not forget about those communities of color, which remain disproportionately affected by gun violence and have been affected by it for years before now this has become such a national gun violence epidemic. So I began a career in advocacy for safer gun laws with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America and Everytown for Gun Safety. And I was really grateful to have the chance to be able to just tell my story, to travel around the country, to implore the very legislators and policymakers that I now am one of, to really be about the business of saving lives and making sure that we were putting in place safety measures in our existing gun laws so that no one would ever have to be me, that no one would ever have to experience the pain like I have experienced and so many other survivors like myself. I decided to run for office in 2018, in those 2018 elections, and we managed to flip a seat that was once held by Newt Gingrich. And so I know the change is coming. The fact that I am in this seat and so many other gun sense champions like me have been elected to office because of the work of Every Town for Gun Safety and Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, times are changing. But I know that we need to continue to work as hard as we possibly can because there's still so much work to do. But I will keep fighting for families like yours. And thank you for everyone here that's fighting for families like mine. And I know that we will truly, truly make a difference because we have no other choice.
Thank you so much, Lucy. Your story is both moving and motivating. Thank you for being with us today. We're also proud to be joined by Reggie Moore, the Director of the Office of Violence Prevention for the City of Milwaukee's Department of Health. Reggie, we all wish we could be with you in Milwaukee right now. You've been a crucial and innovative leader in efforts to reduce gun violence, to create more effective public policy solutions, and affect major systems change. So we're really glad to have you here, Reggie.
Thank you for having me. I also wish you all were here as well. A lot of effort went into preparing for the DNC. And I'm also glad that this conversation is happening. I think this is an important issue, not just for our city, but around the country. As you all know, cities like Milwaukee have been severely impacted by gun violence this year after seeing a steady decline over the past 4 years in both non-fatal shootings and homicides. This has been a horrific year. And we've been proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with Moms Demand Action in every town locally, particularly after a mass shooting that occurred at Molson Coors in our city. We also had a mass shooting in a local neighborhood on 12th and Locust, where we lost an entire family of 5 individuals, including 4 teenagers. And so oftentimes when we talk about mass shootings, we think about schools, we think about workplaces. But as Congresswoman McBath mentioned, there's, number one, a daily unfortunate parade of pain that we see in our community as it relates to gun violence, but we're also seeing higher rates of multiple victims who are impacted by gun violence in our city. The Office of Violence Prevention was established in 2008 and expanded in 2016. We have always had a commitment to addressing violence as a public health issue. And in 2017, we engaged our community in prioritizing what we should be doing as a city to prevent and reduce violence. And when we look at the movement that we're in nationally, where communities are grappling with more comprehensive and expansive approaches to community safety, we feel that we've been ahead of the curve in that regard. What it really comes down to is the courage, the commitment, and the will to actually invest the policies and resources necessary to make plans like the Blueprint for Peace a reality, and to scale them to the degree that they need to be to address the pain on the front end so that we're not over-relying on prisons and the criminal justice system to address issues of trauma and mental health and mass incarceration and unemployment. And unfortunately, based on the study that was released in 2019 by the Violence Policy Center, Wisconsin had the second highest rate of Black homicide victimization in the country. So we can't look at we have to look at gun violence and racial justice together. And I think, in Ms. McBath's story of her son, and when we look at the issues related to police-involved violence, these things cannot be looked at in isolation. So I'm really glad that this conversation is happening. But again, I'm also really excited about the actions and the investment that will be required to address these issues to the degree that they need to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Reggie, and thank you for all you're doing in Milwaukee. And I know many of you are excited to hear from our next panelist, a midfielder for the Philadelphia Union, who made headlines last year when he literally seized a microphone and called for action on gun violence. I am proud to turn the mic over to Alejandro Bedoya, a member of Every Town for Gun Safety's Athletic Council, to talk about what inspired him to use his platform to raise awareness about gun violence.
Yes, hi, everyone. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for including me in this event, and it's such an important conversation amongst a very inspirational panel. As you all know, I played soccer my whole professional career. After I graduated from Boston College, I decided to go over to Sweden And I spent almost 10 years playing in Europe, in Sweden, in the UK, in Scotland, and then in France. I've also represented the national team, the USA, on the international level, having played in a World Cup in Brazil. And I've always followed this issue of gun violence from afar, even when I was living abroad. And living abroad in Europe, the conversations in the locker rooms, many times when we hear about these mass shootings and the gun violence here in America, would be the Europeans asking me, the players, just what is going on in the States? How, you know, the gun culture, it's such a huge issue. They just don't understand it, you know, and it all sounds strange and horrible to them. And it's just the same way I feel about it, right? It doesn't really exist there, and it shouldn't exist here. As many of you guys know, I grew up in Western Florida. So that's a community in a city that neighbors Parkland. Growing up there, I played on those grounds many times at Douglas. On the soccer fields there, I have many friends who attended that school. And that Parkland shooting really hit close to home to me, obviously. I had a teammate here at the Philadelphia Union as well who lost his best friend in that shooting. So, you know, as a father of young children, and knowing that that's right next to where I grew up, this is a city of gated communities, of low crime rate. You never think something like this would happen there. And it did, unfortunately. So that even compelled me to get even more involved, you know, in the gun issue and become part of every town and work with Moms Demand. And, you know, Shannon, you just mentioned about the moment where I did grab the field mic after I scored a goal. I don't score often, so I don't really plan celebrations. So, you know, that was the same weekend. El Paso happened on Saturday, I believe, and Dayton shooting happened on a Sunday. And we played on Sunday, if I have that correct. And our game just happened to be against DC United, you know, in our nation's capital. The stadium's, like a mile maybe from Capitol Hill, you know, Congress. And I scored the opening goal. I went over to the corner, you know, obviously you celebrate, you're happy, ecstatic. I saw one of my teammates, his sister and his mother just sitting on the sideline. So I saw them, recognized them, went over to give him a hug. And as I give him a hug, I looked over and I saw the mic on the field. You know, I had no idea if it was on or if it was, you could hear it, you know, TV normally runs on a delay. And something just hit me. I went over there to the mic and just asked Congress to do something, because that weekend I had my mind, you know, life is more than sports, you know, soccer for me. And I couldn't stop thinking about those events that weekend. You know, I urged Congress to do something. I was using my platform, and it went viral, you know, and I think it really hit home to a lot of people. You know, it was incredible the amount of messages I got from, you know, gun violence victims from those areas as well, from, you know, Parkland. You know, so many victims suffer from anxiety and so many issues, you know, PTSD and things like that. So just to kind of give them a voice was so important for me, and, you know, to empower them as well. It's just absurd, you know, in our country, how, you know, the numbers I think are about more than 100 people are shot and killed every day. It's just a number that we can't accept that as a reality in our lives and keep proceeding like it's normal. Oftentimes I feel like people become almost numb to, oh, here another mass shooting happened, you know, and just go on with their lives. So since that moment, since speaking up on the field, obviously it was a very viral moment. I can say that I'm proud to have participated in a number of events. And like the other panelists here, I count myself as an ally and advocate in the movement to end the gun violence and save lives. So, you know, as an athlete, my voice doesn't carry more weight than others, but I just happen to have a larger megaphone to support our leaders, like Representative Bath, you know, local community members like Reggie Moore, Randy and Simone, who are also on the panel, and yourself, Shannon, by raising my voice to continue to help to push for change. I feel like in doing so, I'm being the most patriotic American I can be. And I just can't continue sitting idly by, you know. For me, staying silent is wrong. And living here in Philadelphia, you know, the gun violence this year has surged. Just this past weekend, over 30 people were shot. More than 100 kids have been shot in Philadelphia since the start of this year. And I will never just keep quiet, you know. This is something that hits home, close to home, you know. It's happened 3 times already. The school where my kids go, daycare centers, get a call and text about this school being on lockdown because of an active shooter situation or a suspect with a gun. It's absurd, So I'm all about trying to improve our society, our community, our livelihoods, and for the future generations to continue to be safe.
Thank you so much, Alejandro, and thank you for using your platform on this issue. Our next panelist serves as a senior advisor to the Biden-Harris campaign, and she's working day in and day out to elect a ticket that will champion gun safety all the way to the White House. I am so proud to introduce Simone Sanders.
Thank you so much, Shannon. And I am just very excited to be here today. I know I can speak for Vice President Biden and Senator Harris when I say I wish we were all in Milwaukee together on a panel and then going to grab lunch after this. But we are going to be safe. We are going to follow the science, unlike the people that work in the administration, particularly for the president. And I'm just so glad we were able to convene a convention across America and just this really important conversation. Shannon, this is just such a really great panel, and I'm just so happy to participate. I usually don't do panels, but I was like, wait, Shannon Watts, Lucy McBath, gun violence? Oh yes, we are doing this. This is an issue that is so important to Vice President Biden and Senator Harris. If you have ever heard Vice President Biden speak, the last time I think we were literally out in the world traveling on a plane, we were with Shannon. And we did a Moms Demand event. I believe we were in Columbus, Ohio.
Yes. And
we stood with mothers and families and sisters and fathers and brothers and folks who represented every walk of a community because they've all been affected by gun violence. And we stood with them as we heard their stories, as we listened to them champion reform, and as they talked about the leadership that they wish that they had in the White House, but the leadership that they know that they will get if Vice President Biden is elected president. And now that Senator Harris is on the ticket, I've heard her so many times talk about how, as a prosecutor, she has held more mothers who have sons and daughters and family members who are victims of homicides and gun violence, more than she can care to count. But she remembers every single one, and this issue is so important, and that's why she's championed gun sense, as folks like to say, legislation in the United States Senate, working with folks like Congresswoman Lucy McBath, who is such a pioneer, and every time I hear your story, it's inspiring. We have real work to do. And I think over the next 77 days, America is going to continue to be presented with a contrast, a tale of two presidents, if you will. The president we currently have, who has demonstrated in every sense of the word that he is unable and unwilling, frankly, to lead. As our forever First Lady, Michelle Obama, said the other day that, Donald Trump is he's unwilling to meet the moment, especially when it comes to addressing gun violence in America. Donald Trump is unwilling to take responsibility for, being president for all people. He likes to single out cities such as Chicago and Baltimore and talk about what is not being done, but rarely comes to the table and partners talking about solutions. And I'm just excited that I work for folks such as Joe Biden and Kamala Harris who are committed to this issue. We appreciate every town who has endorsed our ticket, who has endorsed Vice President Biden, and we appreciate Moms Demand. And I do believe that when we announced that Senator Harris was our running mate, it was Moms Demand came out and talked about how this was one of the strongest tickets ever on gun safety. And the reality is that Vice President Biden is going to be a champion on this issue. As president, a Biden-Harris administration will be your partner in the White House. And while this is going to be a fight, we have real work to do over the next 77 days, and we'll have real work to do when we win in November, because this is an issue that has, it's not new in Washington. There have been many all across the country. Folks know the fights that have been had to achieve gun safety legislation in this country. But I'll tell you this, Joe Biden has taken on the NRA twice on the national stage, and he's won. He took them on in 1993 when he shepherded through Congress the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act. And that act established the background check system that has since kept more than, I believe, 3 million firearms out of dangerous hands. And again, in 1994, then Senator Biden, along with Senator Dianne Feinstein, secured the passage of the 10-year ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines in this country. As president, Joe Biden will defeat the NRA again. We believe that gun violence in America is a public safety, but also a public health issue. Which is why I'm so glad to see Reggie here on this panel. We know it's going to take all of us, but Vice President Biden and Senator Harris believe that it is in fact within our grasp to end our gun violence epidemic, while also, yes, respecting the Second Amendment, because we reject these notions that you can't do both. As president, President Biden will pursue constitutional, common sense gun safety policies. He's going to hold gun manufacturers accountable. We're going to get weapons of war off our streets. We're going to ban the manufacture and sale of assault weapons again in high capacity magazines in this country. We're going to regulate possession of existing assault weapons under the National Firearms Act. We're going to buy back the assault weapons and high capacity magazines already in our communities, because you have to attack this on all fronts. We're going to close the hate crime loophole. We're going to close the Charleston loophole. We're going to close the fugitive from justice loophole, which was created by the Trump administration, mind you. We're going to end the online sale of firearms and ammunition. We're going to create an effective program to ensure individuals who become prohibited from possessing firearms relinquish their weapons. We're going to do the work. And we can't do it alone. It's going to take all of us. It's going to take the coalitions in every town and Moms Demand have built. It's going to take working with public health officials in space and places all across this country, in rural communities and urban communities. It's going to take really great legislators like Lucy McBath, us standing with her and her colleagues in Congress to get this work done. It's going to take all of us. But I want to be clear, and if you hear nothing else I said today to folks out there, that this is an issue that is front and center for a Biden-Harris administration. This is something we're committed to. We are just so happy to be partners with you in this work. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you. And you're just making us all feel so fired up to finally have the strongest gun sense ticket in the history of elections. So thank you so much. This is the strongest presidential ticket with Biden-Harris, and we're so excited going into November. So let's talk with each of the panelists. And I want to start with this question. I've been doing this work now for almost 8 years, and I know that it is a marathon, not a sprint. So I'm interested in how you all stay motivated to keep fighting for gun safety, knowing, this is a marathon, not a sprint. It's a battle we will win, but it's not won quickly. So Lucy, let's start with you. How do you stay motivated?
Well, thank you, Shannon, for that question. And, I have to honestly say it's all the hundreds and thousands of people that I have met along the way since my own son was murdered. All of the survivors and the family members that I've spoken with that really believe that a change is coming. All the people that continue to volunteer for this effort that have not even experienced gun violence, might know someone, but they're dedicated to keeping people safe and to saving lives. I do remember one really quick example. I remember when I was campaigning last summer and I was running from one event to the next and I was running a little late. My staff was trying to usher me, move me along. There was a gentleman there that he seemed, when he wanted to get a chance to speak to me, he didn't get a chance to. And as we were moving away, I really sensed something that he really needed to say to me. And, you get that feeling. And I just stopped my staff and I said, no, this gentleman, he wants to tell me something. And so we went back and I said, sir, thank you so much for coming today. And, how can I help you? Is there anything we can do for you? And he said to me, and it just broke my heart. But he said to me, I just lost my grandson last night to gun violence. Just lost him. He said, but I felt it so important to be here today. Because I was like, why are you here? You should be on your way home to your family. He said, I felt like this was the right thing to do. And that's why I'm here today. And of course, he was going to be leaving immediately to go, to bury his grandson. But there again, just to hear that story from that gentleman who knew exactly what I had been through, and he was suffering the same way. And for him to say, this is important, electing you as a gun sense champion, helping to change the very loss that I have lost my own grandson to is important. So when I continue to see people around the country and hear these stories, I know we are making a difference. And as Shannon, you said over and over again, this is a marathon. It is not a sprint. It will take time to change the culture because it has become so dangerous. It will take time, but we have armies of people now that are standing up. We will have leadership in the White House that will be standing up for what is right. So I'm encouraged every single day by the movement that I see building, the foot soldiers on the ground, and my colleagues that are working with me alongside me. I'm encouraged by that because I know the change is going to come. It's happening already.
That's so true. I feel it every day. Reggie, what about you? What keeps you going?
This issue is extremely personal. When we hear numbers like 99 or 106 or 408, we've had 408 non-fatal shootings this year and 106 homicides. That's a life. The example that was just given about the gentleman who's grieving his grandson, that is a mother, it's a sister, it's a child, it's a loved one, it's a schoolmate, it's a coworker. These are lives that we're talking about. And what keeps me motivated is actually seeing the leadership in our community at the grassroots level. When we see survivors who stand up and take action, whether it be politically, whether it be providing and creating support groups for moms who have lost their children to gun violence, folks who actually go and testify at budget hearings, at state houses and demand leadership to support efforts that address violence as a root issue, and understand that this is something that's preventable. It's not inevitable. And as Alejandro said, this is not something that we should ever accept or be comfortable with. Gun violence is preventable, and we should be doing everything possible to address it. And standing alongside advocates who are committed to doing that is what keeps me motivated.
Thank you. Alejandro, I'm sure that when you used your mic that way, you heard from some people that didn't appreciate your point of view. What keeps you going?
Yeah, well, actually, there was a very minimal amount of people when you look at it. I think I would say 99% was extremely positive and inspirational to many. And, you're always going to get the crazies, as I say. But it can be discouraging. You look at the fact that the House passes legislation and then you find out the bills are just sitting at the Senate floor, the desk or whatever. It can be discouraging, but I look at it this way, like I mentioned before, in Philadelphia here, over 100 kids have been shot this year. I mean, it's mind blowing. And we want all this to have ended yesterday, right? So there's no easy way, but as I see it, it's not a hobby. This is about life and death. And as Reggie just mentioned earlier, the impacts that gun violence has. It just doesn't impact the victim. It's their family members, they're even non-relatives. It impacts their neighbors, a whole community. It's traumatizing. So, as a parent, I just, as I mentioned earlier, I can't just choose to close my eyes, sit idly by. We just have to continue to act. Bringing it back to sports. We celebrate the wins. Like when we are able to stop state legislation that would arm teachers, which sounds absurd. And we just continue to keep pushing towards a larger goal of trying to end gun violence because it is preventable. So how do I stay motivated? I'm an athlete, right? I can be very stubborn as an athlete, and I'm always trying to play my best, trying to play hard. So for me, giving up is just not an option. I'm going to always keep pushing towards trying to keep my kids safe, our community safe, and improving our society.
Yep, and everyone needs to get off the sidelines. That's exactly right. And Simone, there are so many issues I'm sure that you juggle every single day. Gun violence is a priority, as you mentioned, for a Biden-Harris ticket. What keeps you focused and motivated on this issue?
What keeps me motivated is, again, hearing the stories, but also understanding that the vice president and Senator Harris have committed themselves to ensuring that this is not just a conversation, that there's real action that is being taken. I obviously, wasn't around for the assault weapons ban. Okay, I'm a fresh 30, but I have read many stories and heard the vice president himself talk about how there were many people who were scared to take on the NRA because every single person that had quote unquote come for the NRA had lost. They were a powerful, and I say were because we have taken them on, and I believe that Shannon, you had no small feat in taking them on in this last round and helping take them out, okay? But they were an extremely powerful lobby that many folks cowered before and would do nothing to stand up to them. And Vice President Biden, against the advice of a whole lot of people, then a senator in the United States Senate, took them on because he knew what he was doing was right and what he was doing would save lives and make communities better. And so that's what keeps me going and keeps my colleagues going. And we, tonight at the convention, folks are going to hear from young people that we are spotlighting in this fight, a diverse group of young people that I'm so excited about. And it is unfortunate that the people often closest to the pain are the folks that have to bear the brunt of doing the work. I think, this panel is frankly an example of that. But what inspires me are these young people who should be out doing a whole range of things, enjoying life, being kids, but have committed themselves because of what they've seen, because of what they've experienced, because of what they know, have absolutely committed themselves to raising their voices, fighting, advocating, and really pushing folks on across all sides of the aisle to address this issue, because this isn't an issue for Republicans or Democrats or independents or Green Party. This is an issue for America. And that's how we view it on the Biden-Harris campaign. And I'm just excited that, this particular issue and cause is getting the elevation and spotlight it deserves tonight.
I'm so glad you brought up the NRA, because I like to point out as often as possible that they are weaker than they have ever been, and our movement is stronger than it has ever been. Lucy, I want to ask you a question. This Congress, the House passed its first significant gun safety legislation in more than 20 years when it voted to require background checks on all gun sales. But you and your colleagues didn't stop there. The gun sense majority in the House also took action to close the Charleston loophole, reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act and disarm domestic abusers, fund gun violence research, require police accountability. And just weeks ago, the House passed the strongest gun safety appropriations package in history. But all of that progress has been stymied by Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell, who have stood in the way of saving lives. So when the 117th Congress is sworn in next January, with Joe Biden in the White House, of course, what progress do you think we can expect to see?
Well, Shannon, that's an excellent question. And I have no doubt that, we'll be tackling all of the policies that are affecting gun violence in the country. We have so much progress left to make, and we're really just tipping, we're at the tip of the iceberg right now. We're just really kind of beginning. On gun violence, I'm very, very proud to have sponsored the first gun safety legislation to pass the House in decades, and that was federal background checks for all gun sales. Also closing the Charleston loophole, which we've already mentioned today. I fought really, really hard, because one of the first things I understood when I was visiting the CDC is that, all of the funding that they did not have to study the effects of gun violence. Working with you in gun safety as an advocate, I understood that the NRA had placed so much emphasis and pressure to prevent the CDC from being able to study the effects of gun violence. I was able to appropriate $50 million in funding for gun violence prevention research, and even sponsored red flag laws. I've done that as well to ensure that we're making sure that people that appear to be in crisis and have access to guns, that if we need to take those guns away from them, we can do so. And that was based upon what happened with Parkland, because Parkland is what actually spurred me to run for federal office to begin with. Also, we've done a lot of good work on gun violence, healthcare, and also our veterans. And, we've made really, really good strides in Congress, but this is just the beginning. There's so much more work to do. And once we take the Senate, and once we take the White House, I have no doubt that we'll be able to pass all of the gun safety legislation that we need to put forth. There's so many more policies that we have to put forth. It will take some time to get it done. But all of my colleagues, we're on record having passed in the House gun safety legislation. When we get the Senate and the House, we will move this legislation very, very quickly because it matters. The longer it takes us to do this, more people lose their lives.
It's so important for everyone to remember that is watching this is that these bills are dying on Mitch McConnell's desk while Americans are dying in the streets, and we can fix that in November. Reggie, we all have a role to play in gun violence and violence prevention. Can you talk about the different partners and what actions they've taken that work with you on the Milwaukee Blueprint for Peace?
Right. We've always talked about this as an all hands on deck effort. This is not something that one department or division can handle. And we have an amazing team in the Office of Violence Prevention, but we went to the experts. We went to the community to, again, define what the priorities of this work should be. And so in the Blueprint for Peace, there's 6 goals and 30 strategies that, again, we've collectively been advocating for. And again, there's a role that, whether you're an individual, an organization, an elected official, even media, there are roles that, and artists, there are roles that people can play, again, to raise awareness about the impact of this issue, to support families, again, who survived or been impacted directly by gun violence. But a few examples I would like to uplift is 4-1 for Life, which is a violence interruption program that was identified as a strategy by the community in the Blueprint for Peace. And we've been able to work with our partners at Frederick Hospital, Ascension Health, Children's Hospital, and others, again, to, number one, respond to shooting victims who arrive at the hospital and begin the work of trying to prevent retaliation while also mediating conflicts in the street. And so we have an amazing team of individuals, all of them from the community, and many of them have had their own struggles with violence in their own lives. And they are extremely effective, credible messengers to be able to deliver a message to an individual who, again, may have lost a parent or a best friend or a brother, and they are filled with rage and they want to engage in retaliation. And to have somebody be able to speak life into them and to get them to understand, look, this is a decision that could affect you for the rest of your life, and you don't want to have to do 17 to 20 years for taking somebody else's life in revenge. That's not what your loved one would have wanted, and that's not what our community wants. And so, again, this is a journey, and this is, as I've said, personal in the sense that I've been impacted by this issue. Many people in our office have been impacted, and pretty much everybody in our community has been impacted by gun violence. So again, this is not something that, as you said repeatedly, that people can sit on the sidelines or opt out of. This is something that requires everyone, and there's something that everybody can do to address this issue.
Thanks, Reggie. Alejandro, you've had critics tell you to keep issues like gun violence out of the game, just to sort of stick to sports. What do you say to those people? And bigger picture, what role do you think athletes, actors, musicians, cultural influencers can play in ending or even reducing gun violence?
Yeah, I think everyone has seen now amongst athletes in the sports world, kind of the saying, I'm more than an athlete, right? I preach that every day. I'm a father first, I'm a husband, a brother, a son, a business owner, and of course, a voting citizen, right? So I have First Amendment rights that protect my speech and human rights. And I think we all, as concerned citizens, have more obligations and responsibility to call out what's wrong and what's happening around in our communities and around our great country. I've worn my national jersey, representing the USA with great pride all over the world. I love our country, but we need to feel safer. We need to improve our society where our gun culture isn't where it's at right now, where 100 people are getting shot and killed every day, So for those that say, stick to sports, this and that, I reject the notion that this is a political issue. As Simone stated earlier, I think she said this is something, nonpartisan, bipartisan, that both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, can get behind. This is human suffering we're talking about, and we all should be outraged, right? So that's how I see it, that we all have a responsibility and kind of to speak out, doing something about this, no matter our profession. You know, our laws have to change, our culture has to change. And like has been mentioned by the many panelists here, it takes all feet on the ground. You know, it takes educators, advocates, legislators, gun violence victims themselves, and many, many more, you know, to continue to raise our voices so that we can enact that change that we so desperately need across our country. And I'd just like to end this part, Nelson Mandela, a great quote by him that resonates with me so much is, sports has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire. It has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. It speaks to youth in a language that they understand. So for me, as an athlete that is able to bring so many fans of all different, creeds, races, backgrounds, religion, I can continue to use my platform and voice to give those voices to be heard, and to continue to try to make an impact and connect with the youth, the next generation, who are the ones that are really going to drive this change, who have inspired me. You look at the students from Parkland and what they've been able to do with their platforms. I think it's incredible. And I'm not just going to stick to sports. This is more than sports. This is life.
That's exactly right. It is not right or left, it's life or death. So thank you for making that point. And Simone, the gun safety movement used to be the third rail of American politics. But after we elect gun safety champions Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to the White House, the NRA and gun rights extremism, that will be the third rail going forward. So how will President Biden make sure that we end gun violence in America?
So, it's a good question, right? Because, I think it was Reggie that made this point earlier, is that oftentimes when we talk about gun violence in America and the epidemic, we talk a lot about mass shootings. And I do believe that's because mass shootings are what make it on, the cable news. But there is this everyday gun violence in America that the folks on this panel know all too well. And that is the gun violence that we also have to ensure that we address. And again, they may not make national headlines, but they're just as devastating to survivors and victims' families. Those are the cases and the families that Senator Harris often talks about. So look, Vice President Biden really does believe that there are proven strategies for reducing gun violence in America without turning to incarceration, which is extremely important because we are not trying to contribute to exacerbating the overcrowding of our criminal justice system. There's a group violence intervention, and that organizes community leaders to work with individuals. And so under Vice President Biden's plan, and I encourage people to go to joebiden.com/justice. This plan can also be found on joebiden.com/gun safety. But particularly under his plan, we have a plan to address gun violence in America by using a pilot program. And so Biden-Harris administration will allocate a very sizable amount of money. I think it's around $900 million, almost $1 billion, to this pilot program targeting 40 cities across the country. 40 of the cities will be the cities with the highest homicides. 20 of the cities will be the cities with the highest homicides. And the other 20 of the cities will be the cities with the highest homicides per capita. The folks that do this every day, y'all know that those are two different things. Okay, and these pilot cities, we will direct resources. This will be a grant program, so this isn't a loan. This will be a federal government, local government, state government partnership to really address this issue with surgical precision using some proven community-based initiatives. So I really think that it is remarkable that we could soon have an administration that is really interested in working with state and local governments to fix issues across our country, that is really about the business of partnership, because that's what we need. We don't need the president, as he does right now, barking orders at governors and mayors and expecting them to just fall in line. This is a group effort, as we like to say, and mayors and governors across the country, they need a partner in the White House. They need a partner in the federal government, and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be that partner for folks.
That's amazing. I can't wait for that to happen. I want to thank all of our panelists. Before we end, I just want to ask each of you to offer a few closing remarks. So Lucy, let's start with you.
Well, I want to thank you, Shannon, once again, and Everytown for Gun Safety for hosting this phenomenal panel. And I just want to remind people that, it has taken 25, 30 years for this culture to evolve. And I know that sometimes we think that things should happen overnight, but be rest assured that we're making progress. And as First Lady Michelle Obama said in her speech the other night, we have to make sure that in this election, they were voting as if our lives depended upon it. Well, yes, lives are depending on us doing the right thing, electing the right people, the right president, the right vice president to keep our communities safe. So yes, lives are depending on this election. Lives of people that we can save are depending on this election. So please make sure you exercise your right to vote. Know that people are working on your behalf, and we will do our best to keep you safe because you deserve that.
Thank you. Reggie?
I would just like to say that there is no more important policy priority than community safety and well-being. We can talk about housing, we can talk about education, we can talk about economic development, all of which are important. But if people are dead, or if people are afraid to go outside, if people fear for their lives in terms of being shot, we have to secure community safety as a fundamental right for every human being. And I'm excited to hear about the announcement in terms of investment in local communities, because again, when we look at the things that have been deployed or the facilities that have been fortified, we need resources to fortify families with living wage jobs, with access to quality housing. We need resources and the deployment of resources in public health approaches that we know work. And so again, I'm honored to be a part of this conversation. I'm excited to see the action that will come, not only from this conversation, but in cities around the country to continue to address this issue. Thank you.
I love what you just said about fortifying families. Thank you, Reggie. Alejandro, final thoughts?
Yeah, I would just say that, everyone has a role to play in creating this change. Obviously, I'm not a political leader, a policy expert, or a community organizer. However, I'm going to continue to use my platform to lift messages, to lift young leaders who are battling for our future, and who can make our community safer. I do believe that the vast majority of Americans want to see reforms like universal background checks, and temporarily removing guns away from situations where so he's harm himself or others, as Congresswoman Macbeth related to earlier. So common sense gun laws and a culture of gun safety, they go hand in hand with responsible gun ownership. We all want to keep our families safe. I think, like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to keep beating that drum loudly and farther with my platform, and to create change and have an impact in our communities to create a safer society.
Thank you, Alejandro. Simone, last words go to you.
Well, I just want to say thank you again for the work each of you are doing. Look, as I said earlier, and it can never be said enough, that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris know that gun violence is in fact a public health epidemic. That is at the forefront of our minds, but we also know that change is within our grasp. We can do this. Vice President Biden often says that we are the United States of America. There is nothing we cannot do. And folks have often heard him speak about how the effects of gun violence over the years that we have seen, whether it is the everyday gun violence or the mass shootings at schools of young children, at high schools, it is debilitating. But we have to keep fighting, and Vice President Biden is committed to doing this work. Senator Harris is committed to doing this work. We've got 77 days until Election Day, and all of the reforms that we've talked about on the federal level, getting a United States Senate that will, and a leader in the Senate, a Senate majority leader who will take the bills that are sitting in the legislation that's sitting on his or her desk and move them and push them through the Senate so we can get them up to President Biden and sign them. None of that will happen if we don't do our work over the next 77 days. And so we are committed to standing with you. We are committed to fighting with you. And we're also committed to ensuring that we're turning out the vote, that we're having these conversations. We're so happy to partner with every town and places all across this country to do this work. We are always, ever so delighted that Shannon Watts will join us to have a conversation or push us to think about issues differently. We thank you, Congresswoman, for your leadership in Congress on this issue. Thank you, Alejandro, for standing up and using your platform. Reggie, for doing the work on the local level. This is what we need to do. And so I will just tell folks, if you like what you heard on this panel today, text VOTE to 30330 and find out how you can get more involved, because this work is going to take all of us. Because if we don't do what we need to do on November 3rd, when we go to bed on November 4th, because I don't know about y'all, but I won't be going to sleep on November 3rd. When we go to bed on November 4th, we need to ensure that we left it all on the field, that we did everything we can to ensure that Joe Biden is the next president of the United States and that Kamala Harris is the next vice president, so we can start acting and doing the work on the federal level to just do what we know needs to be done. Do what the majority of Americans want, is us to live in safe communities. Okay, universal background checks. Yes, it's like a universal. Everybody wants, people love them. Like, why is it so hard? But that won't get done. We will not accomplish the mission if we don't do our work over the next 77 days. So yes. This panel got me all fired up. So I'm fired up and ready to go, Shannon, and we thank you all for your work.
Yes, thank you. We are fired up. 77 days. Thank you, Lucy, Alejandro, Reggie, Simone, Randy. Thank you for joining us. We are so grateful you're in this fight with us and for supporting the strongest gun safety ticket in the history of this country. I want to close with a pitch because we need everyone's help. So if today's conversation inspired you, also please text the word READY to 64433 to get involved with Everytown, Moms Demand Action, and Students Demand Action. We need you to pitch in with our virtual organizing work every day between now and November 3rd. Also, thank you so much for your support, and don't forget to tune into the Democratic Convention program tonight and amplify the voices of survivors, including Moms Demand Action volunteer Deandra Dykes. They are leading in the movement for gun safety. Thank you, everyone.